Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
All right, this is Annabelle. Nice to meet you.
About anything?
Like a book, a poem. I actually,
Yeah.
What direction is the poem facing with this window, do you know?
Yeah, well, that's the Hudson River. Yeah, it's sort of, it's westish.
It's westish? Okay, that's good. So the sun's
So
going to go down?
southerly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the sun will come down right here. If there really is such a thing as an adolescent brain, the claim is that adolescents don't learn the way adults learn. That there's some developmental pattern that's analogous to a physical pattern that might exist. Well, that is interesting to me because it seems a prima facie case can be made that that's a preposterous claim, that there is very little evidence in human history that the human brain isn't, functional as it will ever be very early in life. I can give so many examples. It's really tedious even to bring it up. But you think of people like Blaise Pascal in the 17th century. At the age of 16, he knew as much math as anybody in the entire world. If there was such a thing as an adolescent brain, how come he didn't have one? Alexander the Great's father, Philip, used Alexander as a commander of the left flankers of his armies when he was 13 and 14. Then you can go on and on and on and on, and you wonder, what could this possibly mean? What's generating it? Where is it going? Why does it exist? Well, here's a time to raise a sort of Foucaultian distinction, but I wouldn't limit it to him only. And that is knowledge which has some kind of basis in the world outside, and socially constructed knowledge. Now, it's not clear in what way claiming an adolescent brain could be socially constructed. I mean, who would that advantage? Why would anybody want to find research like that establishes that concept? It raises an issue that has come up with me because I found it really strange. The most recent students I've taught have been young people between the age of 14 and 17, not university yet. And I asked them whether they were adults or not, and I found out that very few called themselves adults. They called themselves either children or adolescents. And I said, why? Why do you find that, attractive? What is an adolescent? Tell me what it is. And I tried the next obvious line of questioning, and that is, there are prepubescent human beings and there are postpubescent human beings. Which are you? Which are you? I mean, are you pre or post-pubescent? Then you'd maybe have to explain to them what that means. But none of them had any problem knowing whether they were sexually mature or not. I said, doesn't that suggest to you that there is no such thing as a human adolescence? You either are an adult, able to carry on the species, or you're not. And they were perplexed with that. So I said, let me give you an example not taken from human beings. Anybody know any entomology? Of course they don't, but it's really easy to introduce larva, pupa, adult as a categorization of development in other species. What's a larva? A larva is a little worm, all right? What's a pupa? Well, it's a kind of a bigger worm, like a caterpillar. And what's an adult? Well, that's a chrysalis. It's something totally different, like the butterfly. Insects do have an adolescence. Human beings don't have an adolescence. Why do we use that term? Where did it come from? When was it first used? Is this knowledge? What makes it knowledge? Now we have people who are saying that not only are, is this kind of a sexual distinction not significant, but there's kind of a brain development which is arrested somehow. Attention deficit disorder, which is a coinage of the last 20 years. Dyslexia. Why would somebody find these new, I guess, what would you call them, mental imperfections of certain kinds? What advantage is that? To whom? To whom is it an advantage? I'm just talking about a socially constructed category. Well, I could see that if you want to maintain somebody's subordination, you could tell them that they're not adults yet. like we do politically. We say people aren't ready for self-determination, so we should control their lives until they are. Totally different category. But what happens in school? That's where adolescence comes from. The term was never used in the early modern world. Never. You were either a child or you were an adult, and there was nothing in between. And the concept that children are innocent, that's a recent creation, at least in Western history. I don't want be culturally chauvinistic, but in Western history, it's kind of new, and it comes with this whole disciplinary regime. It is the social extension of dependence in school that has led to the notion of adolescence, because little children in pre-modern society had jobs that were necessary for the survival of the society, which they were physically capable of performing. And those jobs were stripped of them, and they were put into special places for children, away from the adult world. And they were considered somehow special and to be treated specially. So they weren't supposed to know about adult behavior. Well, it seems to me that if I were a lousy teacher, I would like concepts like attention deficit disorder or dyslexia. First of all, I wouldn't have to say that my kids were dumb, because now I have a nice way of cosmetizing that. I also would not have to admit that my classes stank. I could say that there's something wrong with them. You see like little fidgety boys and girls who can't sit. Well, wonderful explanation is that they have something neurological wrong with them. They can't sit still. I'm doing great work. This is brilliant. This is interesting. But inside, there's some, imperfection, malfunction going on. And that becomes a way of increasing the period of dependence to a point where you're infantilizing your own young on purpose. This obsession with giving, mind-altering drugs to little children, I'm doing something for you, sweetheart. I'm helping you concentrate. But actually what you're doing is you're pacifying that child and leaving the field of activity open to yourself. You put a kid on Ritalin, you don't have to worry about them anymore. They'll sit there and, be, dutiful while you can go upstairs with your wife or husband or whatever it is and play your games. You have this permanent babysitter. So that's what I think is how knowledge becomes power. I'm not an expert on the field, but, if you started looking in a dictionary for terms like dyslexia, you would find hundreds of uncatalogued diseases of the mind that, just from one generation before. And they all have controlling values, So it seems that we're living in a world where knowledge keeps growing, but it isn't really knowledge at all. Mm-hmm. It's really useful for extending the years of dependence and also giving. So now the kid says, I'm not an adult. You get them to adapt your language. That's the part that I love. But why aren't you saying you're an adult? Look, you're 6'3". When are you going to be big enough? You're always going to be a child because your brain isn't mature yet. It's really a graphic illustration of what I think Foucault means. And how knowledge, which is supposed to be an exploration of the world, really is not an exploration of the world at all. It becomes a social necessity to maintain the dominance of some and the oppression of others. And in my view, having taught high school for 4 years, which is a very short time in my academic career, I think that that's what it's all about. It's about child training as though it were dog training or cat training, to make the kids respond as you want them to respond, including, them assimilating language, which is really unhealthy for them to use. You've got them. If you've got them saying, I'm not an adult, I'm not responsible for myself. Mm-hmm. Well, if they're going to say that, then where do you go from there? You've got them. So what I try to do in class is open things up.